He's Albert Breer, the Monday Morning Quarterback, senior NFL reporter. You have a situation with Davante Adams. He is preferring a trade, not demanding a trade. What's the difference between preferring a trade but not demanding a trade?
It's better PR, right? Like it's like somebody saying somebody applied the franchise tag versus being slapped with the franchise tag, right? Like so I guess it's a little friendlier. I think part of it probably, Dan, is I Devontae maybe being a little bit sensitive to the idea that he'd be a malcontent. Because I do think like he likes Antonio Pierce. I think, a nuance to this is what like went on there last year, and like how there were a small group of veteran players that, really played a role in getting AP that job in the first place. And, ironically enough, like if Davante Adams is traded, two of the three would be gone because the three guys were really Max Crosby, Josh Jacobs, and Davante Adams, and so now Jacobs who's in Green Bay and Adams would both be gone. So I think that's part of the reason why is because Adams I don't think Adams wants to disrespect Antonio Pierce, but at the same time his contract sets up in a way where it's pretty clear he's not going to be there next year. And, as a guy who's turning 32 in December, I'm sure wanting to play for a contender right now and have a chance to go compete for a Super Bowl is a big priority of his.
Okay, what's he worth? What's it going to cost in
Yeah.
return? And do you have a list of teams, pecking order of
Yeah.
where you
So, I
think he
mean,
could
I
go?
think the obvious ones are the ones that he's got connections to. So the Jets, obviously played all those years with Aaron Rodgers, the Saints. He has the relationship with Derek Carr, played in college with him. Derek Carr was a huge reason why he wanted to be in Vegas to begin with. So, you start with those two teams, which are the obvious connect the dot teams. Those teams actually also have guys as number one receivers in Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave that I think could take the pressure off of him as an older player. Just in, what sort of coverage he's seeing and everything else. So those would be the teams I'd start with. As for his value, um, I don't think they're going to get like a Brandon Ayuk type of package. The reality is Ayuk is 26, Adams is 32. So I think the more reasonable comps for him, for an Adams trade would be Keenan Allen and Stephon Diggs. And if you really dig into what those trades
Hmm.
were, and both those guys, their production last year was actually a little bit better than Davante Adams. Now those guys had better quarterbacks. Diggs had Josh Allen, and Keenan Allen had Justin Herbert. But those guys had had better production, slightly better, but better production last year. Adams or Allen wound up getting traded from the Chargers to the Bears for a fourth round pick. Diggs got traded from Buffalo to the Texans for a future second round pick, so a second round pick that was a year out, and fifth and sixth round picks went to Houston with Diggs. So there was a give back there. So that's roughly the value of a third rounder. So I think that's what you're looking at here. Probably a three or a four. My guess is that Vegas probably wouldn't move Davante Adams for a four. I think some teams will try to go fishing and see if a four would do it. Ultimately, I think a three is probably what winds up being the price.
Yeah, I was told a two, but that might be a two that's what Vegas wants, but that doesn't mean that's what
Right.
Vegas is
And
going
that's
to.
what I'm saying. Yeah, I mean, what Vegas wants, Vegas is actually going to is obviously going to ask for a little bit more.
Yeah.
I think the value probably most teams would tell you is a three or a four.
But then what does Max Crosby do? Does he prefer a trade after Devontae prefers a trade?
Prefer to trade. I think it's certainly a question. I don't think the Raiders, as competitive as they've been, and Antonio Pierce deserves a lot of credit for this. There aren't very many spots in their rosters that don't qualify as need positions, right? Like so, this is a very real ground up rebuild for Tom Telesco and Antonio Pierce. They are not close. But I think they are walking this tightrope of we know we need to rebuild the roster, but we also need to provide the new coaching staff some proof of concept. and not make it look like we're taking this thing down to the studs. So, I think with Crosby, it sort of rides a little bit more on where are you on Halloween, right? When you're, whatever it is, when a week, 2 weeks out from the trade deadline, what does your record look like? Are you still in the race? If you're still competing for a playoff spot, then I think you keep Max Crosby. And I think you do it almost regardless of what he wants.
But if that's
Um,
the case, then are you keeping Davante Adams as well? That you're in the playoff
no,
mix.
because I think at this point, like Davante Adams isn't a building block for you going forward.
Okay,
Crosby, I have to look up his age. I
he's
think he's still like
27.
25,
He's
20.
27.
Okay, so like Crosby, like let's say if you're Telesco and Pierce right now, you say realistically, we can build this into a real contender in 2026. How much does Adams have left in 2026?
Not much.
How much does Crosby have left?
Eh, a whole lot
Probably a
more.
lot,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Probably still a really good player.
But if you're the Raiders, don't you try to trade Adams like now, like immediate?
Yeah,
Are
I
you
think
gonna go all the way up to
yes.
the deadline? Because
Yeah,
I don't even
no,
know
I,
if
I
he's
don't
gonna
think you want to
play.
drag this out. No, I do not think you want to drag this out where you get into the, you know, phantom injury thing. You know what I mean? Like you just,
Well, he might
and I'm
have
not
that
saying what he
now.
what he
He's
what he was
got.
dealing with this week was that. I'm not saying that, but like I don't think you want to deal with that on a week to week basis. I don't think that that winds up being something that is good for your locker room, is good for your program. So I'm with you on that. Like I don't think you're going to get markedly more for Davante Adams a month from now than you would now. Now, I mean, like, could you get a little bit more because some team gets into an emergency injury situation? That's certainly possible. Um, but I do think like you look at this and you say, it'd be better if we just get a resolution on this now, and then we get a real view of where our team is over the next few weeks, without Davante Adams as part of the equation. And then, we make decisions on guys like Max Crosby and others on the roster that maybe we could get some value back for.
He's Albert Breer, Monday morning quarterback. Last time you were on, you floated out there Bill Belichick and the Jags. The Jags continue to go in the wrong direction here. Do you think Bill Belichick has his staff in mind that would he plug and play with something like this,
Yeah.
or would he want to wait and give me the entire offseason, not come in right away and be judged on somebody else's team?
I mean, like, I don't think he's coming in right away. Like, if that's what you're asking, when was the last time that happened?
Well, if they continue to lose,
Right.
are they going to make it? So you think this owner would give Doug Peterson the rest of the season?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. Like I look like I look at it like they got a division game this week. If they lose to Indianapolis, they go to London at 0-5. If they go to London at 0-5, that's an embarrassing thing for a billionaire. Billionaires don't like being
And that's
embarrassed.
his city. That's his.
And then you're going to a place where he owns a soccer team. He owns Fulham, and he's invested a lot in making the Jaguars a factor in that city. They're going there 0-5. Then they wind up coming back 0-7. I think all bets are off, because that would mean they'd have lost to the Bears and Patriots. All due respect, that's not losing to the Chiefs and Niners. So like I don't know, like I think I think there's a possibility that this could be a midseason thing. I wouldn't rule that out, but I just don't know how you go about bringing in a new head coach in midseason if that's what you're asking.
Yeah,
I think they would you know pick whoever on the staff and make Ryan Nielsen the defensive coordinator and make him the interim coach, and then you know, if you wanted to get a head start, you maybe start working in the background with someone like Bill. You know what I
okay,
mean? Like on
yeah.
that. Now, could you go and get a new general manager? That I think is possible. Like that, we've seen that I believe it was the Browns that did that with John Dorsey years ago, right? Like at the end of the Hugh Jackson. No, yeah, well, it was while Hugh Jackson was the coach when they brought Dorsey in December. And there are a number of guys that Belichick has worked with, Scott Pioli, John Robinson, Thomas Dimitroff that are out there, that don't have that aren't working for NFL teams right now that you might be able to install as your general manager if you were going to make major changes in midseason. That said, to answer the other part of your question, like I think Bill has a real good idea of who he'd have on his staff.
Okay.
Like I think that there would be a bringing the band back together element to all of this. Like I think Josh McDaniels would be part of the equation, Matt Patricia, Joe Judge. Like I think there'd be a lot of familiar names as part of the next staff wherever Bill lands.